Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental enthusiasts, Nick and Laura. On today's episode, we discuss Dungeons and Dragons. We also talk to Lucas Zellers about perseverance, storytelling, and the Book of Extinction, a Dungeons and Dragons monster manual telling the real life stories of animal extinctions and reimagining those animals as fantastic monsters. Very, very cool. And finally, here are some fun facts about the dragons of Dungeons and Dragons. According to their Wikipedia, there are 10 types of dragons that are either chromatic or metallic. Chromatic dragons include white, blue, green, black, and red, and metallic dragons include bronze, brass, copper, silver, and gold. Chromatic are generally evil, and metallic are generally good. Another fun fact is that dragons have 4 legs, whereas wyverns have 2, and their wings serve as their arms. How about that? Hit that music. We're excited to announce that EPR is hosting a second AMA on Wednesday, March 27th at 6 p.m. Eastern. This AMA will feature past guests from backgrounds in academia to target our students and career-seeking listeners. It will be held on YouTube Live, and you can head over to Environmental Professionals' YouTube page right now and subscribe for notifications. Let's get to our segment.
Yeah. That was really cool, by the way.
That was super cool.
Did he mention when his book was going to come out at all?
Yeah, he said it was going to come out in October. And honestly, you are the perfect person to have this segment be about D&D and how he's using that to create monster lore. I thought that was
so cool.
Yeah, 100% agree that it was absolutely wild. And yeah, I loved he was talking about it. You know, the games become more accessible, and you know, we're seeing it in lots of different ways. Like there's a video game that's super popular right now, Baldur's Gate 3, that is a D&D game pretty much.
Yep.
And the amount of possibilities, somebody told me there's something like 17,000 endings or something like that to that game, that the permutations that people have to do to get through all that. It's
crazy,
quite wild. And I love that Lucas was so gung-ho about creating his own universe that had a real world application, which was pretty cool. So yeah, I don't know. Are you big D&D player? If you don't,
I would love to. Like, I was invited to do a group of it, but it was just a bunch of dudes at like college, and so I'm like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. And so I just never came up again. But it seems really fun.
Yeah.
What's your alignment? Your personality alignment?
I'm chaotic good.
Nice.
That's always it. It's just I can't help it.
I wanted to be chaotic evil. I think it would be so fun.
Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah. Chaotic is a lot more fun than everything. And it's like, you know, my true personality, I don't know, but that's what I end up being, is chaotic good. Maybe that's just who I am.
Possibly.
But, you know, it's a lot of fun. I haven't played a ton. Like I have a friend of mine she's a great dungeon master, so to speak. And she's awesome. She creates her own things. I mentioned it in the interview. Like she creates her own worlds, and she actually is an artist, and she designs some of her characters, and she has a 3D printer, and she can actually print those out. She's the coolest person I know.
Wow. Well, yeah, I feel like that's half the battle, just finding yourself a good game master.
Yeah, it really is.
Dungeon master.
And like, I'll even share a great story about that, right? Because we had somebody who like doesn't want to play, doesn't like playing, isn't interested in it, right? But is part of a friend group. And so like they brought the dungeon master's like, oh, well, then I will make a character specifically for you, where all you have to do is give words of wisdom, but they're all based on your favorite band's lyrics. And so that's
cool.
And then like there was a moment where like the character was a raven, right? And someone opened a window, and the raven flies away and never to be seen again. So that was like her way of saying, you can go now, you're good. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. And it was like perfect, you know? And that's like a good dungeon master. That's like what makes a good one. And it's not even like remotely, I don't know. I've only played it a few times, but it's like that kind of care that goes into it is pretty cool. It's really neat to see people do this world building. And it's very, very fun.
Totally.
Yeah. I end up being a bard a lot, and I end up being a paladin. You were wondering. Cool. Yeah, because I love to sing, so that makes a lot of sense, right? And so
it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
How about for our next Dawson Summit, we have like a D&D thing.
Like a
campaign.
A campaign.
That's all we do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it would literally take the entire time.
Yes, the entire time. That's all we do.
Yeah, just games. Yeah. Yeah, for sure, Sam. Yeah, we'll definitely do
yes, perfect.
just that.
Cool.
Nothing else.
I'll let everyone know.
Awesome. Well, on that note, let's get to Lucas.
Cool.
Hello and welcome back to EPR. Today we have Lucas Zellers, author, podcaster, and marketing professional working at the intersection of conservation science and game design on the show. Welcome, Lucas.
Hi, Nick. Great to be here. Glad to be asked. Hello.
Oh my gosh. So the intersection of conservation science and game design. I mean, can we just talk about this the whole time? Because like, what does that mean to you? You know?
Man. Okay. So let me set the scene for you. I came to conservation advocacy and science communication, and I do think of myself as a science communicator, but I don't work for an environmental organization, and my background isn't in biology or field work. My background is in writing and communications. And in about 2018, I started writing. In about 2015, back when the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons was first released, someone finally invited me to a game. I sort of, broke into it and discovered that it was something that I really loved.
Yeah.
And then about 3 years later, I started writing for the game as a third-party publisher. And about 2 or 3 years after that, I had an idea for the most ambitious project I'd had ever, which was a monster manual based on animals that had gone extinct. And that's been what I've been doing ever since. And the genesis of that idea was that the Pokedex and the Monster Manual and Audubon's Illustrated Field Guide are the same book. Like they do the same thing. Right. They come from the same place. They have the same function. And so it was like, well, why don't we just point ourselves right at that? And that crux, the way that turns out to be a portal to all of this, decades or centuries of natural history, the way that humans have related to the world, the way we have made monsters out of the things in it we don't understand.
Yeah.
And that has been like this infinite bottomless wealth of really great conversations and really great stories that people can tell using the mechanics of tabletop role-playing games in a really incredible and powerful way.
Yeah, that is really great to hear, and I already have like 1,000 questions. So when you say like, okay, you have it, you're using real world examples. Do you have like a favorite? Or is it cruel to say a favorite, really? But like, is there something like that really stuck out to you that kind of sparked the whole thing?
That's a tough one. The project we called Book of Extinction, because I wanted to be the guy who wrote the Book of Extinction.
Yeah.
We had to think an awful lot about what made it into the book. And the ones that I knew, there were some that I knew I had to include, right? Like if you're going to talk about extinction, you have to talk about the dodo. You have to talk about the thylacine.
Yeah.
If you're an American like I am, you have to talk about the passenger pigeon.
Yeah.
And so, there were some that were like mandatory. And then there were some that I discovered as we went along and some that just sort of turned out to be kind of the most important. So let me pick an example here. I think, so one of the ones that ended up getting a lot of art for the book was the Japanese wolf.
Oh, interesting.
And I didn't know when I started looking at this story that it would be so emblematic and typical of what we were doing with Book of Extinction. But I should have, because for a very long time, our attitudes about wolves have been the same as our attitude about wild things and wild places.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book by Farley Mowat called Never Cry Wolf. He was a Canadian surveyor, and he was one of the first people to like study Arctic wolves. And he had like a huge crisis of faith after the second or third time he had an encounter with a wolf that clearly could have killed him and did not.
Right.
Up until that point, it was assumed that they were sort of bloodthirsty carnivores that would take every opportunity to eat any kind of living meat they could find. And he was one of the first people to sort of discover that they had kind of a society and a language and a way of moving through the world and shepherding caribou herds in the same way that Inuit peoples might have. So there's all of that. And that was really like that kind of spirit of what a wolf is. And that conflict was cranked to 11 for Japan. They had their own native wolf Linnaeus would have called it Canis lupus hodophilax, although trying to figure out which wolf was which at the time was really complicated. There were any one of a number of like native canids that could have been what that was or what Linnaeus was attempting to describe. And the Japanese names for it encompassed religion and folklore as well as the actual creature. That's kind of the way they related to it. And for Japan, the wolf was a benefactor because they mostly planted rice and grains. So the wolf was the creature that kept the deer and the boar at bay, that kept your crops safe rather than the other way around that it would have been for Montana ranchers.
Right.
So around the time of the Meiji Restoration, when Japan was bringing all of these new Western ideas and trying to build this, sort of modern Western culture, they brought in people from America, agricultural managers from America who had their own attitudes about the wolf. And within just a few years, for centuries, farmers had prayed to the wolf to protect their crops from deer. And then suddenly they began to view it as a threat. And within like about 30 years, they went from rare to completely extinct.
Oh my gosh. So we imported or exported the big bad wolf is what you're telling me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. That's tough. Like, how do you, so you're writing this, you're reading these stories. Like, how is that writing process? Is it, because, that's heartbreaking to hear, of course. And it's, there's too late to do anything about it. So was it more challenging to read these kinds of stories? Did you have to take breaks and be like, I need a moment. I'm going to go watch something super like happy for like 10 minutes? Like, what was that like?
I mean, I think I went through all 5 stages of grief in the course of writing this book. And I think that's one of the things that I want the book to do for people is to kind of help guide them through that process.
Yeah.
I've told these stories a lot on podcasts and conventions and whenever I can. There's a few responses that I tend to hear more and more often. The most common is, man, humans suck.
Right.
And that is 100% not the point.
Right, exactly. I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
That's just what people say to me. And like, I think a part of the gift of writing this book was taking about 2 years to really dig into these stories one by one, feel what they make you feel, and then kind of looking at them from a top-down perspective or from a 10,000-foot view. And I think what I got out of the Japanese wolf story especially was that we made our choices on this and we knew better and we could have made different ones.
Right.
So this book isn't, as much as this book is about tragedy, this book is about the audacity of hope. The idea that things could have been different and would have been different and will be different in the future if we are able to learn from the past.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's really well said. And it's kind of cool. So gosh, when you have like something like that and you have that reaction, they're like, oh, people saying, because like when people say that, it's almost like they're dismissing the value of the book, right? Like you're kind of, wow, that's too bad. I guess there's nothing we can do about it, right? So how do you change the mindset of folks to be like, hey, I know that's what your first reaction is, but what's your second? Like, how do you get them there?
That's a tough question. There's 2 answers to that. One is the answer that I can give, from having conversations about this. And often it's just showing the next step or showing another example. Or really kind of pointing at the other part of the story, like the point of decision. In the case of the Japanese wolf, there's like one actual factual bad guy. His name was Edwin Dunn. He was an Ohio rancher that the Meiji government appointed to manage this kind of process. And he brought over like bounties for wolf pelts and strychnine poisoning for traps. And like, so in those cases, I'm able to say like, a human sucked or a couple of humans sucked.
Right.
Like as a species, we're not lost or inherently cruel. We just made the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
We had a science consultant on this project, and I'd love to tell you about her a bit more, but the way she talks about it all the time is inertia. So often what leads to these kinds of situations is the weight of past decisions or the inertia of solutions that we've inherited. So this book, the second reaction is pointing to the choices that we made before and really identifying the things that we would have to change so that this doesn't happen again. And often those solutions are far more simple than people think, far more straightforward and far easier now than they would have been at the time.
Yeah. It's funny. It kind of reminds me Like, one of the things that Florida did, over time is they took all the water from the interior and pushed it to the coast, all the fresh water, right? And when they did that, they changed the way the water cycle in the whole state works. And so what ended up happening is all the crap that used to go to the middle, and I mean that literally, like the waste from the entire environment went to the middle, now goes to the coast. I'm like, oh, that's bad. We should fix that. And so that's one of those things that ends up happening is we have to learn from the mistakes of our past by putting things back to the way they were sometimes. And it's a really hard thing to think through. But I love that. I love that you guys are doing that. And so you have the science consultant, like what was their role in the book? How did you use their experience?
Yeah. So her name is Tiara Curry, and I don't mind calling her out by name. So when I had the idea for the book, I knew that I was going to be doing a lot of research that I probably wasn't yet qualified for. College educated, I'm a pretty good researcher. I kind of know how this is done, but, I wanted to make sure that coming at it from a lay perspective or from a game design perspective, that I was getting the factual stuff right so that we had our inspirations in order and we weren't, talking about things that didn't happen or talking past our listeners or, really having that expertise. So I called around to a bunch of different organizations. And the first one to really grok what we were doing and kind of see the value in it was the Center for Biological Diversity. Yeah. It's an organization that does a lot of legal and media advocacy on behalf of extinct species, most notably enforcing the Endangered Species Act.
Interesting.
So Tiara is the director of the Saving Life on Earth campaign. She's at the heart of working with a lot of different actors to try and find a solution for the extinction crisis. And her big, hairy goal is to make sure that animals don't go extinct in our lifetime. So she was the Japanese wolf being one, and every entry that we wrote, we sent over to her to kind of read through and get her take on it. A lot of times she was able to tell me, this is how the industry frames this, or this is what that word kind of means in the broader context. I think you might be misusing it. Right. Or, there's these other meanings that you have. So everything went through her, and she was often able to suggest literature. Like she would say, there's a couple articles you need to read, and here's the links to them. So it was a really collaborative process, and we were able to give them access to this other language of advocacy and experience and storytelling that hadn't really been applied to conservation efforts before, which is kind of where the game design angle came in. So I was doing my best to meet her expertise where it was and, represent these creatures as accurately and historically true as possible, and then take those and turn them into something that was really going to be a fit for what people want to get out of this book, which is how to use it at their table in a Dungeons and Dragons game.
Yeah. And I really do want to ask you about how you take that process and make these real life creatures have mythical versions. Like, I want to get to that. But I've got to ask, you say you don't have a background, in science. Your background's in writing and communications. Were you afraid to take this on? Were you nervous about that? It doesn't seem like you were at all. You're just like, let's go, let's do this. Like, where did that mentality come from? Like, is that just a part of who you are? Or did you have to kind of teach yourself to be okay with it?
Yes to both. And I am 100% confident. So where we are in the project is we raised the funds to, fund the print run back in about a year ago at this point. And we are so close. We're so close to printing the book and putting it in people's hands. And I'm so thrilled for people to be able to hold this amount of work and really use it in a tactile way and show it to people and tell these stories. But I know that as soon as that happens, someone's going to come to me with something that I missed or something that I mishandled. The story of extinct animals is often the story of indigenous peoples. And that's really difficult to write. There is no way that I got 100% of this stuff all the way accurate. So, we had to rely on a couple of things. One, our best effort. Like, we did everything possible to make this book as accurate as it can be. Two is our best intentions. To make it clear to people that we came to this with an attitude of empathy and respect. And that counts for a lot. And then three is just like the remainder, which is like what we couldn't have done or what we probably will have missed, or the typo that we'll inevitably get through editing.
Right. I know. Yeah.
And for all of that, I'm still nervous. But what got me through all of it, and I think what will continue to get me through all of it, is that there are 71 extinction stories in this book. That's 71 stories that I don't want to be repeated ever. So in really, really important ways, this book isn't about me. or what I like or what I wanted to see or what I thought was cool. It's about them.
Yeah.
And that counts for a lot. I get to be sort of invisible as an author. I get to be an advocate rather than a focus or a star.
Right. So yeah, and it's sharing a story more than it is telling your own kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, well, how do you take a real life, albeit extinct animal, and create a mythical version of it? What is it? Does it you maintain the same characteristics? You just like what do you do? How does that process work?
Yeah. So we've been doing this as a species. Humans have been doing this for a very, very long time. And the idea of condensing it down, and often it takes centuries to do this. I never see a monster without seeing a culture. And I never, in the same way that I never see an animal or a creature without seeing a habitat.
Yeah.
Same thing. So it can be kind of daunting to sort of condense that down and sort of do it myself. But basically, there are 4 ways that we did it, over the course of the 71 stories that we told. One is sometimes the system in which we were retelling these stories suggested it for us. So there were existing mechanics in Dungeons and Dragons that were like a perfect fit. I think my favorite example of that is the gastric brooding frog.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I think you might know a little bit of this story. There was one frog, Rheobatrachus silus, that was known from northeastern Australia. Gosh, I wrote it down so I wouldn't have to remember.
Yeah, it's Australia.
It's an Australian frog that had this remarkable adaptation. And there are a lot of ways in which frogs raise their young. This is the only one ever known to have done it in this way. They're able to suppress their own stomach acid production to incubate their young inside their stomach.
Yeah.
So they would swallow tadpoles and spit out. They would swallow eggs and spit out tadpoles. So it's a frog inside of another frog. At some point in Dungeons and Dragons history, we created this item called the Bag of Holding, which really exists so you don't have to keep track of how much stuff you're carrying. That's boring.
Right.
It's a bag that always weighs the same no matter what's in it. It's called the Bag of Holding. If you play this game, you've interacted with this, which meant the obvious choice for this is a frog of holding. It's got an extra dimensional space inside of it. There's another frog in there. Don't get swallowed. You're going to have to fight a frog twice. It's absolutely hilarious. Everybody who played this game latches onto it really easily.
That's awesome.
So that was one way that we did it, was sometimes the game said, this is what that is.
That's fantastic.
Sometimes, kind of the second way we did it was this had already been done for us. So New Zealand was pretty big for this. There's this creature called Haast's eagle, largest eagle to have ever lived, absolutely massive. This thing was known as the grappling hook bird, Harpagornis moray, and not Harpagornis like it's referring to the harpax, which is not just a grappling hook like you kind of swing and throw up the, sort of Batman style. No. This was what they used in naval combat to latch onto enemy ships. It's fired with a giant crossbow. So that's the size of the bird that we're talking about. And in New Zealand, the Maori people who had been living with this creature for a long time sort of knew of its existence. They called it hakawai. And they had all of these stories for what it was and why it came to be. So in that case, and in a couple others, and in the case of the Japanese wolf as well, we were able to just retell existing mythos as neatly and as accurately as we could using the 5th edition core rule set.
Right.
That was pretty incredible. The third way that we did it was kind of unexpected to me. I was really hoping to focus on recent extinctions, modern things, ones that had happened since about 1500. But there's a whole ancestry of storytelling and the way that we interact with these sort of monstrous creatures that has its roots in like Pleistocene megafauna.
Right.
Your cave bears, your saber-toothed tigers.
Woolly rhinos and stuff.
Yeah. So there's a couple dozen of those in there. And those we didn't change at all. Our contention was those are straight monsters.
Yeah, they really are.
By every definition of the word that matters, that's a monster. And we just put it in the book straight up, didn't change anything about it, just gave it numbers. So, I loved it when we could do that. Sometimes, and the last way that we did it was just out of whole cloth. Sometimes there just wasn't enough information about this creature or it hadn't left and we didn't know about it for long enough, or we didn't interact with it deeply enough to create a mythos around it. So we just got to kind of reimagine those and kind of look at the way this creature existed and kind of think about what other storytelling threads were already in the core system and kind of bring those together. So for example, there was a brine shrimp in Florida the Florida fairy shrimp.
Oh, yeah.
Discovered in 1956, due for reevaluation in 2010. And by the time they went back, the pool where they'd found it had been paved over. So like it just disappeared. And I'm like, okay, well, I know what this is. It's about 1.5 inches tall. That's the size of a D&D mini. It's a fairy. It lives in the Feywild. So, there's a lot of things that we just got to give a whole new imagining, sort of a new way for people to hang their imagination on this creature, something else that they could encounter about it and really learn to love that had its ancestry in the way things actually were. So that's kind of the 4 ways we did it. Sometimes it was done for us by pre-existing mythos. Sometimes the game told us how to do it. Sometimes we didn't have to do anything at all. And sometimes we just got to have a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, like, gosh, even the names of those mammals are wild, It's like Rontotherium or whatever. It's like, you don't even have to change the name. It just, it sounds made up. It sounds wild. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
So one of the things we love to ask is about people's memorable stories, doing their profession, working in the field, so to speak. And we love to hear funny or amusing stories. So for this book, is there an experience you had that kind of really stuck out to you as something that is just humorous and worth sharing with us?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that really surprised me about starting this project was how welcoming and encouraging people in the conservation and environmental advocacy space are. I called a lot of people and I said, hey, can I interview you about the ivory-billed woodpecker or, the giant beaver? Or have you done any work on this, or what can you tell me? And they really rolled out the red carpet. I think the best time that I had doing one of those was I went to the Joseph Moore Museum in Richmond, Indiana. I found out that there's a huge amount of natural history in Ohio and Indiana. It's just there. And I never would have known. And it's, that's one of the things that I would love for people to learn is this stuff happened in your backyard.
Right.
It's just there. Go look for it. So I called them up. I found out they have the world's most complete fossil giant beaver. About 85% of the skeleton is actual skeleton. And I was like, I would love to talk to you about this. It's got a crazy story. There was a fire at the museum that it survived. I think it's going to be great. So I showed up at the Joseph Moore Museum and I met Dr. Heather Lerner, who's the curator there. And she rolled out the red carpet. She was like, all right, here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to take you back in the stacks. I'm going to show you modern beaver fur. I'm going to show you how we did this and some of the skeleton and some of the casts that we've made. We're going to work our way through the whole museum. It was my first time kind of seeing a museum, not from the perspective of a visitor. I saw the stuff that was in the back, which is most of the museum, it turns out.
That's true. Yeah.
And we went through all of it. It took hours. She gave me a whole afternoon.
Yeah.
And she had this whole planned journey, going from modern back to prehistoric. And it was absolutely incredible. I had a fantastic time. She did not have to do that, but she did because she got it. She understood kind of the value of giving that experience and letting people kind of walk through and taste, touch, smell, feel what this was like. And that's when I knew I was onto something. I mean, I kind of knew before that, but that was one of the experiences that really proved to me that I had something of value here. And it's all down to just the people who are doing this, their commitment to bringing people into the space. This is true of everything. Anybody coming into any profession, if you have an earnest interest and a way that people can help you, they absolutely will. And you never need to be afraid to ask, because sometimes you just have not because you ask not. And that certainly was true of the giant beaver. I got a fantastic VIP experience from Dr. Lerner and the Joseph Moore Museum.
And you're sharing it here, so now even more people will know more about it.
It's in the book. There's way too much information about the giant beaver.
That's too funny. That's so awesome. So I mean, I love that too. And I love the point you made too. I think a lot of times people think, that's a very important person or they're a very busy person. I won't bother them. And, you kind of have to let go of that sometimes. If you need information about a giant beaver, you might as well ask an expert and hopefully you'll get one. And somebody will say yes, right? They have to. They're curious. They want to know why.
I got a lot of no's before I found the Center for Biological Diversity, but after that, I got an awful lot of yeses.
There you go.
Which is weird. Like, I'm used to cold calling people. I'm used to sending an email out of the blue, which, by the way, may be the single most important skill I've brought to this. Yeah, that's what happens when you do that. Eventually, and a lot more than you might think, people say yes.
Right.
And it's fantastic.
Yeah. So, And I mean, do you have advice for somebody because I hear that all the time. We talk to a lot of different people in the show. It's just like, don't be afraid to reach out. But, it still doesn't happen. Sometimes people still like they put up a wall. And so like, is there advice you would give somebody to kind of let that go? Because I mean, you're not going to get what you want if you don't, but what's kind of helped you be like, you know what, I'm just going to send a bunch of emails. I know it's weird and awkward and we don't know each other, but I'm going to do it anyway,
Yeah, there's a couple of really key things that can make that process of outreach work a lot better. And this is something that like I was I was trained for. This is where my degree really came in handy. So, rule number 1, be concise. Be very quick about it. A few sentences, a few paragraphs. You don't have to tell your whole life story or kind of sell people on the big thing yet. You're just trying to get, you're just trying to make a connection. So be concise. Rule number 2, be quick, or rather, be specific. Have a precise way in which people can help you. When I came to Dr. Lerner, it was, please tell me about the giant beaver. When I came to the Center for Biological Diversity, it was, do you have someone who works on this already who'd be willing to kind of consult with me on this? Like I had a plan for what that was going to look like. I called a museum in Massachusetts back during the pandemic and said, do you have audio that I can use for the companion podcast? And they did. Often when you come with that kind of specific plan, it makes it really easy to say yes. Like, yes, I can do this for you. Or no, I can't, but I know someone who can. And it's not like it doesn't put the mental load on them to figure out how they can help you. You already know. So be concise, be specific. And finally, be ambitious. I think one of the things that really caused people to lock in was the idea of adding a new language to conservation science and science communication and environmental advocacy. No one had really done this yet. And since a lot of people have started to do it, but that idea of breaking into this new system and adding a new audience to this was really attractive. It had never been done before, and it made people feel special. It made people feel like they were doing something new and unique and valuable for the things that they already cared about. So you're going to be calling a lot of people, you're going to be emailing a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be a long thing. It doesn't have to be confusing. Be concise, be specific, and be ambitious. And it makes it really, really easy for people to say yes.
Oh yeah. It's great advice. And it's funny, we talk on the show a little bit, like I see resumes all the time. And even just sending a resume, it's kind of like a cold call sometimes. If you don't know the person, it's kind of like that. And, the ones that you don't pay attention to, I saw one where it was literally a full page of text, a full page of like an essay. And I'm like, I can't read this. I don't have time to read this. This is so long. So if you see an email like that, it's the same thing. People have that visceral reaction. It's like, I don't know who this is. And I have no idea how I'm going to get through this all because I have a bunch of other things to do today. So those are all really, really great points. And I think that's, communication comes in lots of different forms, right? You're writing a book. You also have a podcast, and I need to ask you about that in a second. And, you've got like all these, we have new media all the time, the way we interpret it. So how do you kind of incorporate all of these different types of media? What made you decide to do this book versus doing something else? Like, why the book?
Yeah. So the book was because that's the way in which tabletop role-playing games function. That's the kind of medium that this whole hobby was built on. So if you don't know, the way a tabletop role-playing game works is that you all kind of get together around a table, maybe 3 to 6 of you, and for a few hours, you tell a story together. And where people kind of get hung up is that whenever there's an uncertainty or whenever you want to acknowledge the presence of randomness in the world or chance or fate or whatever you have, use a random number generator to kind of help you tell an interesting story. Usually it's a 20-sided die. And that means there's a bunch of math and a bunch of weird words that nobody understands and a bunch of jargon that's like between you and the people who enjoy the hobby, like homework that you have to do in order to...
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And, I try really hard to kind of lower the barriers to that kind of thing as well, in the same way that I'm lowering the barriers to understanding natural history and conservation. But for the people who love and play these games, a book that you can hold in your hand is really useful. And a stat block, a set of tables that tell you what numbers to use when you roll those dice, is what they can use. So it was never like this was always going to be a monster manual. It was always going to be a list of monsters that you kind of flip through. Here are the numbers. Here's where they're from. Because that's how I discovered the game. And that was the connection between Gary Gygax and Autobahn. Like that's the through line between conservation and tabletop role-playing games. So it was always going to be a book. And then in the way that, we can spin that out into virtual tabletops and PDFs and digital things and make it really accessible. But, at some point, the core of this was the backbone of it was always going to be a hardback. The companion podcast was something that I did because I could not fit all this stuff into the book. I did not have space. Yeah. I did not have time. Every single one of these things was a bottomless. I don't want to say bottomless pit because that sounds like you're not going to enjoy it on the way down.
Right.
It was an iceberg. It was a portal to thousands of years of human history. So being able to go and meet someone and have a conversation with them, that was another part of like giving them a way in which they could help me in a way in which they could benefit, because I got to put a spotlight on their work and the things that they were doing. And I got a chance to really immerse myself in these stories and figure out, what's the maybe 3,000 to 5,000 words of material that I'm going to cut down to 400 to 600 that we have space for in the printed version. So the companion podcast was a really great way of doing that. And it also let me like talk to people and take them through that journey of that really kind of emotional journey of the 5 stages of grief and reckoning with the mistakes that we've made and all that stuff that we talked about earlier, in a way that they could, like they could hear my voice and be with me in my office and kind of understand not just what I was learning, but how it made me feel and how I wanted them to navigate those feelings on their own, to end up with a book that was about hope and not about tragedy or giving up.
Yeah, I mean, it's very well said. And I think it's kind of it's a testament to the work that you've put in here. And so, it's really cool to see. I love that, when we talk about extinction, we're talking about human history. And you're talking about a lot of, it's not just the history of an animal or an area. It's the history of the people as well. And I think sometimes we forget that. You're like, oh, the wolves are gone, but everything else is still here. So it's fine. And there's so much more involved around that, So I love it. Absolutely. But I don't know. We also love to talk about our guests when we have them on. We love asking them about their other hobbies, right? The other things they do too. I think sometimes people are afraid to talk to other people because they seem like, oh, they're the expert in this. But you know what I mean? Like they're the most. But if I also know that they garden, I have another simple thing that I can do. So what do you do outside of writing this incredible book and doing this podcast and many other things? What do you do for fun? What are your hobbies?
Oh man, this book exists because I have this terrible tendency to monetize my hobbies. I just It takes a long time to play D&D, and justifying that amount of time was a huge part of what got me started in publishing for it back in 2018. But I think one of the things that makes me different in the way that I approach stuff is I'm a musician. All right, that was one of the things that I wanted to be when I was a kid. It's on my list. So like when I was 12 years old. I wanted to write a book. And when I was 21 years old, I wanted to be a college professor. And I've done both of those things. So the next thing I have to do is like start an album and start a band and release an album.
There you go.
So I've been playing guitar since I was like 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
At this point, it's just kind of what I do to relax and center myself and understand the world in a different way. And it's also a great way to connect with people. And I think one of the things that's the part of that that's in this book still is that I got my start hanging out with people like a generation back from me. So I come from a folk music tradition. And at the moment, the easiest way to encounter music is in a recorded form. Like, what did I like when I heard it on Spotify? And that's how people kind of form their music tastes. And for me, it was most of the songs that I know, I learned for the first time hearing them performed live by people in a place. And then like what I had to learn to do as a musician was play along before the end of the song.
Right.
That was extremely formative for me. as, it's just kind of trying to pick up information and synthesize it really quickly, but also to like be in a place with people and recognize that these songs were about a moment in time, a way that people understood the world and the way that they told stories about the places and that they were in and the things that happened to them and the people that they loved. And so, I'm a musician from a folk music background, and that cannot help but change the way that I interact with art and storytelling.
Yeah, and I love that explanation too, because even every performance is a moment in time, right? So even if it's the same person, you're seeing them in a different way, in a different light. Gosh, but there's some bands that I've seen or musicians that I've seen, and you're like, oh wow, they're worse live than they are in the recording album. But I love it when it's the other way around, right? Yeah, right. I love it though.
No
when
one sounds the way they do on the recording.
No, they really don't. And some people embrace that, and that's like my favorite thing is when you see, like this rawness to a performance, and somebody just putting their heart and soul into it. I think like Shaky Graves is the most recent example. I remember seeing a performance of his and was like, holy crap. It's not, I liked it, but the performance was so much more than just the music.
Yeah.
So I love that. But yeah, I mean, like I say, we're coming up on the end of our time. It's been so much fun. We could talk about actual D&D for like forever. So like, if you're ever bored and you need to talk, we can do that. That's not a problem.
I would love to.
Yeah. And, but before we let you go, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to?
I think this is a great time to talk about the future of the book.
Yeah.
Because I, pointing myself at the Kickstarter campaign for about 2 or 3 years and kind of getting through the editing process, we are almost done. Like we did the Kickstarter, it happened, and that was a great moment in time. And like gathering about 2,000 people who wanted to see this made real. It was incredible. Yeah. And that was a goal that took so long to accomplish. And then getting it into people's hands, like getting through the process of actually publishing this book and shipping it out is a whole nother thing. And that's kind of the next thing. But once it's a real thing, there's this extra life that it's going to have where we get, this is why I made it in the first place. It's like, once this is in people's hands and once they're able to engage with these stories in this way, and once we're able to kind of build study guides around it and do this kind of thing, what's that going to look like? Like now we get to test my theory.
Yeah.
Which is that this is going to really make a difference for people. And I think I know how that's going to go. I have some ideas for how to start it, but I think you guys are uniquely positioned to bring people together on it. So if there's anybody, I would love to talk to anybody who has a place for this kind of thing, who has like outreach programs or museums or educational opportunities, events that they like to do, ways that they can bring people in. I would love to talk about how we can make this a part of that. What, sort of the unique ability of tabletop role-playing games to bypass rational thought and go straight to people's emotional center.
Yeah.
And what that's going to look like, for the next couple of years of my career. I also like, if we're talking to especially young professionals, you're never done. Like the day after you defend your doctoral thesis, you're going to feel very similar to the way that you felt the day before. And there's going to be a next thing that you got to do.
Yeah, that's so true.
And I'm at that moment now. And I would love to kind of walk through that moment with other people in the industry and continue this trend of like meeting people who are really, really smart and have really great ideas for what we can add to this and what we can build on top of it. So that's my hope, is that I can continue to meet those people. And if you feel like you're one of those people, let me know. We've got some stuff we could do.
Right. Yeah. Heck yeah. So, where can people reach out if they do want to get in touch?
Best place to get me, especially my home on the internet, is scintilla.studio. That's SCINTILLA.studio. You'll find my email there, or you can find whichever social media platform I'm using that isn't currently burning down.
Yeah, fair. That's awesome. Well, Lucas, thank you so much for being here. Really loved having you on.
Thank you for having me. I continue to be a little daunted by the prospect of becoming an environmental professional. And you've reminded me that, it's not as bad as all that. And I'm really glad to count myself in those ranks. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's our show. Thank you, Lucas, so much for joining us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. See you, everybody.